Hi everyone, I'm Frank Nasiri. This is our first project management course and set of slides. This first course is mainly about the project management principles. It will first start by defining what a project is, what project management means, and what a project team is, and how a project team compares to other kind of teams. And then we will have a review of some principles and fundamentals. Okay, so let's start by some definitions. Okay, so what a project is. The definition of a project is quite similar to what a process is. If you remember from other courses, a process is about a set of interrelated and interacting activities that transform some kind of inputs to some kind of outputs. And what a project is as we define it here, is a set of interrelated activities still. Usually it involves a group of people who are working together toward a common goal. And what is very critical here to note is that a project will only exist and will be executed over a specified period of time only. That is what is making a project different from a standard process. Okay, that might be a process might be absolutely repeated over time. A process might be an ongoing process, while a project will have clearly one start date and one clear end date involving a certain amount of resources that would help to handle the activities that are involved in there. And as a result, as we know what a project is, project management then is about planning, scheduling, and orchestrating all of these various activities involved in our project in order to achieve the project objectives and still within a specified period of time. Now, what is very important here to note is what a team is and what a project team is compared to other kind of teams. So a team is a group of people that have complementary skills working together toward a common goal. So what is important is to note that we have different kinds of teams. We have self-directed work teams. This is when people come together at work and complete daily tasks every day. And so this is called a self-directed work. The difference a project team makes is that a project team is involving people with complementary skills. These people come together at the start date of the project, start to work together, and they will address the project. They will work within these project activities, and at the end of the project, the team would disband. Okay, and a virtual team is this a kind of third category of team and teamwork. It's about bringing geographically distant individuals together to complete some tasks and achieve some objectives. For sure, projects might have also historically integrated people, so human resources that are sometimes distant in distant sites. Okay, so so this is about remote working, also to contribute to project tasks. So it's very important to note that projects are complex one-time or one-shot processes. Projects are limited always by budget, schedule, and the amount of resources available to the project leader. Projects are developed to resolve a clear problem they are here to achieve, they have a clear set of objectives and goals, and projects are very customer focused. Generally, projects are here to help develop new products or services. These products and services have to address very clear problems, customer problems. So that is why we say that projects are customer focused. A project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. This is from the project management body of knowledge. We will be talking about this in a few minutes. So the classical approach to modern management and its functions. So generally, what is management? Management is about setting organizational goals and then help the whole organization to plan. This means the setting the actions that are required to achieve the predefined goals, and then organize the work. This means allocating resources, assigning responsibilities so people start working, and then to influence resources in order to move toward organizational goals, and then controlling performance. During our next online session, we can definitely dig deeper into each of these functions in order to ensure that you have the right understanding of these general management. And what we know is that these functions are also absolutely valid for project management. So project management integrates absolutely all of these functions of the modern management. Okay. We call it the Project Management Institute. This is the one of the world's largest professional in project management association. So this means that we had in 2017 we had up to 775,000 project management professionals worldwide that were in fact certified, had a certification from the Project Management Institute. So this is about people that are selected based on experience, and so you go through a very comprehensive education program, and you have to pass tests and in order to be certified by PMI. And there is what we call the project management body of knowledge, which is a guide to the project management content. And there are many different areas in business management involved in project management, and all of these different areas of knowledge appear on that slide. So what we are seeing is that managing projects involve skills, so knowledge and skills in all of these areas, being integration management, scope management, quality management, or risk management, amongst others. So what I suggest is that for those students who are interested, here I have integrated a link to an online video, so you can go here and find out more about each of the project management area of skill. So here is a slide that explains how organizations that are called matrix organizations function. So first, you have to look at these rectangles, on top of the slide. So organizations are organized first in terms of functions, and they have pools of specialized resources. Here we have the example of an organization that has resources in terms of concept and design, development, test and validation, product test and validation, and then prototyping. But here we have just 4 examples of functions. many organizations have more functions, such as that might also, for instance, include marketing and sales, or logistics, or whatever. It depends on the industry of the business. So organizations have functional divisions and functional managers that are just supervising these pools of resources. And the way these organizations will organize projects is that you will see on the left that this organization, for instance, is developing project number 1, project number 2, and project number 3. We said that the clear goal of a project is to help develop and create new products. So each project here intends to create a given product. So project number 1, we consider that it is going to develop product number 1. Project number 2 will develop product number 2, and so on and so forth. So how is it that each project is receiving and getting resources? Projects in these kind of organizations are getting resources from available pools of specialized resources. So this means that project number 1 will get resources in terms of concept and design, resources from the development division, and resources from the test and validation team, and so on and so forth. This means that people that are coming from the development or the product test and validation, working for some amount of time, for a specific pre-specified period of time for project number 1. And at this point, what we are clearly seeing is that people that work in project number 1 for the duration of that project will clearly have 2 bosses. The project leader during the project time, but they still have their functional manager that is in charge of helping these members of the organization and supporting and supervising their careers in the organization. So that is why we said that during projects people have 2 bosses, and very clearly, if the member of that organized matrix organizations during the time they are affected to so assigned responsibilities for a project number 1, for instance, if they are to ask for holidays, very clearly they will first ask their development, for example, functional manager, who will contact the project leader to see if whether they can just come to an agreement for some holidays for any member working in a given project. So we can dig deeper into that if you are willing to during our online live session. We call them sometimes project managers and sometimes project leaders, but we are absolutely talking about the same thing. So depending on the organizations, we are having these two different positions, different names for the same positions. And when projects are quite small, this means that they have a kind of up to 10 or 11 members. The project manager will also take over team leadership responsibilities. So, but when projects become larger, then this time we will need project team leaders that will on a daily basis work with the staff and will report then and work closely with one project leader. Projects clearly have 4 phases. The conceptualization phase, which comes first, followed by the planning, execution, and the termination phases. This means that during conceptualization, what we have to do is about first determining the real problem, then identifying stakeholders, defining project objectives and scope. This means scope means what the project will achieve, is supposed to produce, and what it is not supposed to complete. And then the project leader or whoever involved, whoever else involved in this first phase will help to build rough estimates in terms of timing, in terms of budget, and in terms of the skills required using specific techniques to execute properly a certain project. Then comes the planning phase. So here, once the conceptualization phase is getting the approval of top management, then the project might then enter the planning phase. Here, the project leader will assemble project team and will start developing overall plan, schedule, budget, and risk management documents and into the execution phase, where the role of the project leader in this case is to monitor progress in terms of schedule, budget, and risks and quality, and to report to and communicate with various project stakeholders. And once execution phase is over, the project enters the termination phase, where the team will have to bring the project to closure and to learn the lessons from the execution and the planning of a given project, and to identify the next steps. And very clearly, a project is demand in terms of resources. So it's the highest during the execution phase, naturally. So it's very important to understand that organizations don't only work on projects, they very often are having the choice between several projects, and they have to pick one project and complete the projects that they select. And there are very clear selection criteria, and there are techniques to pick the best project. So what does the best project for an organization mean, and how is the selection completed? One approach is the purely financial approach towards selecting the probably the most profitable project offered to an organization. So this is what you very probably learned in a corporate finance class that you might have had in the past. So this is about calculating the net present value of all of the future cash flows that a project will generate over time. So the first expression in the net present value is about C0. This is so we call it a negative term because we are talking about all of the initial costs, expenditures, and investments to complete a project. And from here we will enter a phase which is the different phases of the product life cycle that the project will generate. So here the project is supposed to create positive cash flows, right? And that which makes the project and this product that the project created profitable for the organization, right? So the first technique is purely financial, and to pick or to realize which project is the most profitable over time for the organization. Usually, so here is an example of a project I personally worked on back in 2008, 2009. And what we are clearly seeing is that that was an engineering project. So so what you are seeing is very clearly the years, these columns on the right, 2009, 10, 11, and 12. What we are seeing is that the final cash flow net present value, which is the last row in this table, is negative the first year, very clearly, because costs are higher. Naturally, this is the time during which the project is being developed, so there is a high cost of resources employed in order to complete the project. And from the year 2010, then we are seeing this final cash flow becoming positive. Okay, so this is an example. This is also showing you that all of these tasks can be absolutely completed using a simple Excel sheet and not obligatory a sophisticated software. But having a purely financial approach might represent some drawbacks. So usually business enterprises don't only use one single purely financial approach, and they use what we call a checklist model that they employ. So what a checklist model is, here on the left you are seeing different projects available to an organization, project alpha, beta, and so on and so forth. And here the organization is working on different criteria such as cost, profit, potential, time to market, and development risks. So not only a profit potential, but also cost, time to market, and development risk. So here we pick these 4 different criteria, but organizations might definitely come up with new type of criteria depending on the industry they are operating in, or the very nature of their products and markets. So as a result, here they are extending criteria over only beyond only the profit as a criterion, and they can also associate weight to a given weight to these different criteria, because sometimes for some organizations time to market matters more than development risks, okay, and in some others might be absolutely the opposite. So you can also associate weight to that, and we call it the scoring model. So we are just working on weighted averages instead of only compared to the previous model that we only considered one criterion compared to others. Okay. And for sure, there are also other kind of project techniques called analytical hierarchy process that we will not be developing further in this class. Now we're going to talk about project scope and charter. These are 2 types of documents that project leaders can develop during the early phase, to the first phase of the project, being during conceptualization and during planning. Okay. Anyway, these project documents have to be ready and properly developed and made available. They have to be made available to stakeholders so they have the right understanding of project scope and charter. Let's dig deeper into this. So in order to develop project scope, we have to go through all of these aspects of project management. First, we have to define the problem that your project intends to solve. Second, once the problem to be solved is clearly understood, now the project leader and team have to brainstorm about the alternatives available to the organization in order to solve these specific problems. Then the project leader will identify the project stakeholders and their respective needs, clearly defining the project objectives and anticipating trade-offs. Let's go through all of this. So first, and probably a very important step, is for a project leader and the team to understand exactly what are the kind of problems that the project will try to solve. And I will probably be digging deeper into that during our online course or during our interactions. But usually we see symptoms of one or several problems, and we don't dig deeper into the real root causes of a problem. So why is it important for a project leader to clearly define and to understand the problem? And is that because sometimes we are running projects that because we saw some symptoms, but we didn't understand the root causes that might be solved easier than by deploying resources through a real project. Okay, so and that would absolutely, that would incur inefficiencies and additional costs. So it's very important to understand the real problem that, for instance, the customer is facing, and if the project or the new product is the only way to solve that specific problem. When the, the, the problem or the problems that the project intends to solve are uncovered, we should absolutely not rush into the most obvious alternative to and solution to solve these problems. First, we have to consider different ways to solve the problem. And of available alternatives, we have to consider the ones that would best solve the problem, and why. So we have to ask ourselves a set of questions such as, is the seemingly best alternative that we saw is more or less costly than other kind of suitable alternatives? And will the alternative of our choice result in a complete fix or in a partial fix of the problem, and why? Okay, and so we will be evaluating all of these different responses that we would find to these fundamental basic questions, and only after this step we will select the best alternative. Stakeholders are critical to a project because the project is here to serve stakeholders. And for sure, one category of stakeholder we will see is about customers. So we first have to identify all of the different and various stakeholders that exist for our project. Ask them about what success of the project means to each category of stakeholder. And very naturally, the very interest of stakeholders vary from one group of stakeholders to another. Then our job here will be to meld stakeholders' expectations into a set of coherent objectives for our project. So what is it that we're talking about? So a project stakeholder is anyone who has an interest in the outcome of our project, anyone who is impacted by that project. So it would naturally include a project sponsor, who is the individual who has authorized the project, and other contributors, customers, naturally, managers, the financial staff, or anyone else affected by the project activities, or any kind of people who contribute resources to the project. Okay, so these are all of our stakeholders, and what we need is to very clearly categorize, right, and manage these stakeholders. And obviously, as a function of their interest in the project and their influence or power on the project, we will just putting different stakeholders in one of these four categories. And for sure, key players here for us are those stakeholders that have a high level of interest in our project and also apply a high level of power over the project. So we call them key players. But this doesn't mean that we forget about the rest, but we have to prioritize in order to focus our effort to better serve those stakeholders that are more critical for our project. And one obvious thing is that it's very difficult usually to satisfy any single will of any single stakeholder. So we absolutely have limited resources, and we have to focus on key players first. Who is the project sponsor? A project sponsor is the individual who authorizes the project, champions the project, ensures that managers would support the project team decisions and objectives, and can absolutely have, this individual has authority over the scope of the work. and is here also to provide the team, the project leader and his or her team, with the required resources. He or she, this project sponsor, would approve or reject deliverables, would ensure that the project objectives are in line with higher organizational objectives, and would ensure that and would help the project team to solve any kind of problem they would be meeting during the execution phase of the project. You have to define clear objectives for your project. You probably studied objective management and the way we have to define objectives. So objectives have to be SMART. This means that they have to be specific, they have to be measurable, actionable or achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Okay. This is an example of an objective. Our team is re-engineering the entire customer service. If we succeed, 95% of any incoming customer calls will be managed by one single representative, and 80% of all of these calls will be resolved within 3 minutes or less. So this is an objective that is supposed to, if it's realistic, it is time bound, right? And it is specific because we clearly see that here the objective is concerning our customer call support, right? And it can be measurable because we success means these percentages of incoming calls would be managed and how. Okay, anticipating trade-offs. What does it mean? This is a key and essential principle in project management. We call these three items the competing demands on any project, and we call this the project iron triangle: the quality, the time, and the cost involved in a project. Quality means all of the characteristics of the final and the feature of the final product that will be delivered. In fact, the quality of our delivery. Then the amount of time needed to produce those deliverables, and the budget available to us in order to complete the project on time and on quality. And here, if you change any one of these variables, you will obligatorily have an impact on the other two as well. We can dig deeper into that during our online session. In order to anticipate trade-off between these conflicting demands, you have to strategically manage what we call scope creep, and you have to master specific communication skills, and you will very soon know why. We call it scope creep. This refers to a project that is seeing its original objectives expanding over the duration of execution of a project. With scope creep, stakeholders are so pressure a project leader to do more than what was originally planned. Suddenly, what you're seeing as a project leader is that your list of objectives grow to alarming proportions. In order so this means that you are clearly working with moving objectives, which can absolutely make your project very ineffective and inefficient, and would be putting your objectives, in fact, your achievement of goals, so we can jeopardize clearly your goal attainment. So to avoid scope creep, you have to absolutely resist the urge of solving any stakeholder and anyone's problems with your project. Okay, so here I will be dropping a document named Project Scope Creep. You have to read and understand this document. So how is it that you have to achieve kind of trade-off and compromise with all of your stakeholders? So to manage compromises, you have to use communication tactics. You have to first start a project with clearly defining the scope and the objectives of a project, and you have to come to an agreement with all your variety of stakeholders. Once you came to an agreement at the beginning of the project, it's very important to realize that even this initially planned agreement might have to be modified over time. But there are specific techniques to avoid scope creep. So keep all stakeholders informed if there's any change in your objectives first. Find out which of the three variables matters most to each stakeholder. Some are more concerned with cost, some are more concerned with quality, and some with time, because they make available the resources they are providing to the resource to your project. Okay, so they might be absolutely concerned with time of execution and the time these resources will be required by the project. You have to explain the consequences of any changes in terms of quality, time, and cost, and you have to ask stakeholders to clarify very clearly what they are willing to give up if they want you to do something that will affect project's quality, time, or cost during it. Let's take a closer look at project resources. In order to estimate project time, cost, and skills, create what we call a work breakdown structure and use it for our rough estimates that we said that are required, and we have to come up with these rough estimates in the very first phase of a project management, which is conceptualization. So here the technique is to consider first the whole project and splitting first the project into major tasks. These major tasks will in turn divided into subtasks and finally into individual tasks that also are called work packages. These individual tasks, each single individual task can be taken over by one individual with and required involved specific skills, time, and budget. Here you can then come up with the informations about all of these three most important elements in order then to evaluate the time required, the budget required, and the skills required to execute the whole overall project. We will be digging deeper into that and during our online interactions with one clear example defined here in this table. So how is it that you can estimate the time? You can easily imagine that if you're new into an organization and new to the job and new to the very, let's say, specialties and skills and know-how of that organization, it might be difficult to evaluate the time required for execution. And so this means that experience can help you become more familiar with this and to do a better job. But if you happen to be new to an organization and then you have responsibilities in terms of project leadership, you can absolutely work with people who know the job in order to come up with the right estimates in there. At this step, which is still a quite early step in your project, you have to keep estimates as estimates and not come up with firm commitment. And so what we suggest is most of the time is to propose kind of ranges instead of firm numbers. And so, okay. This is still a real-world example of cost estimates in a project. Don't only think that cost in a project is about the human resource or the equipment or the software or the logistics. It's also about a project that is, for instance, a company that is making a product in the Eurozone and selling this product in dollar zone. So it's about also integrating exchange rates and many other factors such as opportunity cost of capital, right? But also the more kind of standard costs such as the man-month and other costs involved. So far we talked about objective and the scope of a project. This means the quality, the time, and so scope in terms of quality, time, and cost. Now, what is a project charter? A project charter is a more comprehensive document that includes the scope, but also many other additional aspects of the project. So it spells out the nature and scope of the work and management's expectations for result. So in fact, it includes the mission statement, but also the scope and objectives predefined. It will also integrate the expected time frame of the work and milestones, the resources available to the team, the constraints of the project, quality requirements, assumptions, any kind of assumption and major, but also the major risks related to a project. So risk management is also is an integral part of project management skills. We will be digging deeper into what a project risk is and how it has to be managed. And once you have developed the project charter, you will distribute it to all stakeholders and you have to collect all of the agreements. So you have to achieve an agreement about this, all of the different items included in that project charter. So a template of a project, a potential project charter and a template of a project scope will be provided to you for future use. Conceptualization, project schedule, and budget. How is it that we are now going to define a schedule? It's absolutely essential in this first phase to come up with a kind of valid estimate of the project. And one of the most important reasons is that once you come up with estimates, the project sponsor or top management might absolutely change their mind about the project. They might absolutely say, hey, this project is going over the budget we can invest in that project, or yet it requires skills or whatever that we can't invest in that project. So a clear response to these estimates might be a no-go. So it's very important to come up with a kind of valid rough estimate. So how is it that we can build a schedule for our project? We have to have an approach called backward planning, and we will be digging deeper into that. And this is why is it that we always start by the end deadlines of the project, and that from that deadline we backward plan toward the very moment we have to start a project and invest resources. Okay, so this is an example of how is it that you have to understand the schedule. Here we have an example so we will be digging deeper definitely into that and having an interaction about this very specific scenario where you had an estimate of delivery time and you start working and all of a sudden and this happens very often, something, a constraint is imposed to you. So how is it that you are going to manage time given unplanned and bad surprises you might be facing during the project? So what will help you build your schedule is absolutely this work breakdown structure technique that we used previously. Okay, that is very important to know exactly what are the individual tasks that have to be accomplished, how long each would take, right, and to integrate that into your schedule, right? At some points you will have rigid deadlines, but you also have to know what are the deadlines and milestones and intermediary deliveries that are offering you to some extent some degree of flexibility. So there are different methods to build schedule. The most common used approach is about bar charts, but let's take a closer look at each of these approaches. This is a bar chart. The other name is Gantt chart. On the horizontal axis, you are seeing time, and on the vertical axis, the activities or the tasks that need to be completed. So here, very clearly, the project would start with the blue kind of task, and once this task is over, two other tasks can start simultaneously within that project at the date of 15th of August. Right, and when the top red task is over, then another third or fourth task can start. Okay, and this is the example of a real world bar chart or Gantt diagram. So here you are just what you are seeing is that some tasks are being developed in a sequential manner. Let's consider these tasks in green. Okay, and some tasks might absolutely be executed in parallel during the project. So what you're seeing clearly is that when these tasks so let's say analysis complete, this is the fourth line in this table, analysis complete. From here, two tasks, one is green and the other is kind of orange color. They can start simultaneously and be ran in parallel. Okay, for sure, parallelizing obviously help you to save time. But don't forget that parallelizing means that you have to employ resources in parallel, so it is requiring more resource. Okay, so that is an important slide because I'm providing you with a link to an online template, Excel template, that can help you build a schedule within Excel. So it's free. For sure, today, project professionals use a Microsoft project as a software, but this might be costly. Sometimes very small organizations won't buy a license to use Microsoft project, but you have free templates that can help you build a schedule. Okay, so what I suggest is that you use this template to schedule the scenario that is described on that slide. So how is it that you can understand this table? On the left, on the very left column, you have tasks, tasks A, B, C, D, and so on and so forth. And right next to the task, you have the task title that describes that task. And for each task, you can see what is the predecessor. For instance, for the first task, there is no predecessor because this is the task that would help you start the project. And you see then on the very right column the duration of any task. And then here what you are seeing in task B is about site survey, has as a predecessor the task A. And what you can see with task D which is grading is that before you can start task D here, you have first to complete task B and C, and so on and so forth. Once you are done with so entering the previous information into your template or into your Microsoft project software, then you have to allocate resource to each activity. Activities are tasks about A, B, C, and D. Here we see that Todd is going to take over task A, Rose over task B and C, and Mike will be responsible for task D, and so on and so forth. Usually, the Microsoft project as a template has obviously quite sophisticated and functions, and once your resource assignment is finished, you have functionalities at your disposal. In fact, within a smart tool such as Microsoft Project, that might tell you that here, for instance, we affected 2 tasks simultaneously in parallel to the same responsible. Here about rows, okay? And this is called, there is a function within Microsoft Project named resource leveling that would help you find these problems and to help you solve it. But we will just see it in a couple of slides. A very important concept in project management is named critical path. A critical path is the longest sequence of tasks throughout your project, and it would determine the total timing for your project. Here, in that example, what you are seeing is that this project has to complete activities A, B, C, D, E, and F. And what you are seeing is that the longest path throughout the project is about DF, so on the bottom here, okay? And the total duration of this path is about 14 days, 1-4, okay? Which is the longest path. So this path is absolutely conditioning project duration. So project leaders are it's very important that they know the critical path. If you are using a smart tool such as Microsoft Project, then the Microsoft Project would help you, would show you your critical path. But some templates are also integrating that. This is what we call the resource leveling. Leveling is about your software or yourself to figure out that you affected 2 tasks simultaneously to the same resource, which is here for rows impossible to work on 2 tasks simultaneously. Okay, so here you have to make a decision and solve that problem. This is about resource leveling. Okay, in case you made any kind of mistake when you first and initially allocated resources. This is another approach towards scheduling named PERT diagram. So this is the PERT stands for Program Evaluation and Review Technique. Okay. So what you are seeing here is that this is a project to deliver a house. Okay, and here is the start on the very left, and thick arrows are showing the critical path throughout the project, and what the numbers you can see over each arrow is about the duration. Let's for instance consider that going from start to foundation complete would take 2 weeks. We will be digging deeper into that during our interaction, but what you can see here is that critical tasks are horizontally represented from start to interior decoration to house ready, which is the critical path. But what you are seeing is that once the frame is complete, some tasks then can be started over and be executed in parallel. Okay, so this is another approach toward making schedules. Okay, what is it that we call crashing a project? at times, it might be necessary to expedite a project. This means accelerating development to reach an earlier completion date and to but also to achieve earlier delivery. Okay, crashing a project directly relates to resource commitment, because sometimes in order to accelerate, you change the way you use resources, or even very clearly use additional resources. And obviously, crashing projects may often increase your cost. Why is it that we accelerate projects? We will come back to that point later. But this very often happens because the initial schedule was too optimistic, or the market needs, the customer requirement changed all of a sudden. So we absolutely have to find a way to deliver earlier than planned. So how is it that this might happen? How is it that what are the ways to accelerate a project? So either we try to improve the productivity of existing project resources, or we can find a kind of compromise between quality and in terms of quality and the scope of the project, or we simply add resources to the project team. In analyzing crash options for project activities, the goal is to find the point at which time and cost trade-offs are going to be, how is it that we can optimize at the same time, so time and cost. So we can calculate various combinations of time cost trade-offs for a project crash. And in fact, what we are seeing is that we have, if we graphically represent, and on the horizontal axis, we have the time and the duration of the project, and on the vertical axis, we are seeing the cost. And as we have to simultaneously make a decision that impacts both time and cost, we have to consider these two dimensions. So this means clearly that we have to calculate the slope that we are getting here, okay, with this formula. And we have to calculate the slope of for instance, example that we will be seeing and reviewing together. So here is an example. I invite you to read this problem, okay? So what you are seeing here clearly is that somebody has simplified the task for you. First, you are seeing activity involved in a project, in a given project on the very left, followed by the normal situation involving the normal duration that you had initially planned and the normal cost that you initially planned. And then the two right columns are about crash options. Crashing for each single activity means that you will reduce the time required for that activity, but also reducing the cost involved for that specific activity. So this means that very clearly you will see activity A and B going from 6 days and 7 days to 4 days and 5 days, and that their respective costs would this time be increased from $2,400 to $3,600, and for activity B going from $3,500 increased to $5,000. Okay, so the questions for you here are the following: which activities are the most likely candidates for crashing? Okay, and then the second question is going to impose to you a kind of critical path. And given the very nature of the critical path, what do you think is the priority in terms of who are the best candidate tasks here for this project if we are to crash it? Okay,